All right, I think we are live on the latest disaster of the Retro Roundtable. How's it going, guys?
Pretty good.
It's going well, man. Doing good.
Ste, are you totally muted like usual, or you good? You work out your issues?
Yeah, I'm good.
Sweet. Well, welcome back. This is our first attempt at doing this on a twice monthly basis. So we'll see how that goes. As you may have noticed, we are short one person, the Grand Poobah of RGB, but we'll make do without him. He'll be back next month, I hope, assuming that he passes his Alcoholics Anonymous exam. So yeah, we're just gonna, this might be a little shorter of an episode because of that, but I think we still have some good topics lined up. And I guess, as usual, we'll start out by ignoring the chat, sorry guys, and just doing our individual interesting topic du jour, and then we'll move on to some bigger group things and take questions from the chat and go from there. Does that sound good?
Interesting topic. I wouldn't go that far.
Well, we'll try. We'll do what we can. Okay, so who wants to go first? I can do it if you want.
Yeah, go.
Okay, so my boy Wes over at Retro Fixes, aka Zach's rival in crime.
He's a good man. He's a good man.
He messaged me on Twitter and was like, "Hey, Hyperkin is sending me this Wii to HDMI thing. Do you like? I know you guys have probably at least thought about doing something for Wii. I don't have any use for this. Can I send it over to you? You guys can tear it apart and mess around with it and see what you think of it." I was like, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." She sent it to me. It came in a box that said that it was for the Wii. Then when I opened it up, I'll show this on the camera real quick. It actually says that it's HD cable for Wii U, so that was kind of a confusing. I don't know what happened with there, if they just like totally misprinted that or what. So I think this thing was designed for the Wii because on the box it says its max output is 480. But I don't have a Wii right now. I do have a Wii U, so I tried it with that. I popped it in and set it down to 480 analog output. Looked pretty terrible, as you can imagine, and not just because it was in 480. It was quite a bit of noise in this thing. First of all, it was like everything was ghosted, so you'd see like a copy of the image slightly below it. It had this really weird vertical not vertical, but like diagonal noise going across the image. Like lines that were moving very slowly upwards. And then there was like a cross-hatching type of noise that's kind of more typical that you might see. I also forced 1080p through this thing, which worked fine. It still looked like ass with the same type of noise. The only difference was the ghosting. Instead of being slightly under, everything was slightly to the right, which is kind of an interesting change, but whatever. I did crack it open. It's just a macro silicon chip, and as Steve pointed out, it's the same one you find in like the cheap Chinese PS2 to HDMI converters. This chip's probably in a million things, actually.
And the cheap Wii to HDMI converters.
Yeah, so what Hyperkin probably did was just slap a silk screen on a existing product or something. Because this, I don't know, it's terrible. It didn't look good. So there's that. I mean, I didn't test it on the Wii, obviously. but the thing says it's for Wii U too, so should be designed to work there. I wouldn't use it. I would just use the Wii U's HDMI direct out. If I get a chance, I mean, I'll keep it around and test it on the Wii, but I don't expect that it's going to magically be any better.
So, Nick, was there any indication that it was actually taking the component output from there and converting it to HDMI or some other cheaper signal?
That's what those macro silicon chips do.
Yeah, I mean, the only inputs on this thing, like if you look at the circuit board, are the RG and B.
Okay.
And yeah, just it spits out HDMI. There's one other chip on here that it's so smeared and gooed up I couldn't read all the numbers, and when I searched like the partial numbers that I could read, I couldn't tell what the chip actually was.
Is it memory, Nick?
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
It's probably regulators, because the macro silicon chip probably needs like a 3.3 and a 1.8. Yeah.
Could be. I mean, I suppose we could figure it out if we like followed the traces to which pins are coming out of this chip. But like, I really rushed to do this afternoon. But in any case, it doesn't really matter much because I thought the thing looked not amazing. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Beautiful.
All right, I'll pass it on to the great Lord Voultar.
So, you know, as you guys have known, I've been practicing. Well, that's not for this.
Let me know when you want to bring the picture up. By the way.
So you can bring that picture up. You can bring it up. Right now if you'd like to, Nick. As I discussed on our last podcast, I was in the sort of the process of filling out mass production with a lot of offshore board houses, right? Trying to get the best deal and trying not to get swindled. I worked out a good deal with a manufacturing plant in Shenzhen, and I have received, or I am receiving, SNES and PC Engine Duo boards that are totally complete. As a matter of fact, this is a panelized board of 10 that will need to be depanelized and tested. They're doing the testing too there. So this is well on its way. Manufacturing and assembly is complete for both the Duo and the SNES. That's all done. The only thing remaining now is they're actually in shipment to me currently. So those should be here within just a couple of days. I got the expensive DHL shipping, so maybe three or four more days at the most. I'll do some testing that evening and do some spot checking. But as far as the quality is concerned with this assembly group, everything that I've seen is fantastic and phenomenal. So I should have a very deep inventory, hopefully within the week and a half at the most, I'm anticipating. So I know you guys have been really wanting some of this inventory, and I've, it's just hard for me. You guys got to understand too, a lot of this stuff right here, like, I'm touching so many different things. I'm designing new things. I'm redesigning old things. I'm, barely staying afloat, trying to get people's systems in and out of here. Assembling these by hand, and then putting them in my own test bed and checking them. That was fine during the very beginning when I was still tweaking and revising this. But I consider this a pretty solid and finalized design. So there's a lot better things I can do with my time than spending X amount of hours sinking it into building these things. So from now on, for these matured products that I have, there will be a plentiful inventory, and they'll be more readily available. I'm sorry for any artificial market that I've created, and the lack of demand, or I'm sorry for not meeting all of the monumental demand. I'm doing my best for you. That's all I want to say.
What do you see? What do you see as the next in line on things that you could do to mass produce as opposed to do it yourself?
I don't understand your question. Like, what will the next the product that I have will be?
Your next maturing product.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the N64 stuff I didn't mention. That's being done too. Ideally, you know, I learned quite a bit here over these past 2 or 3 different little designs. The AES that I'm working on in the MVS2, rather than going through a bunch of different revisions and tweaking and polling for feedback, I think I'm going to do my very best to get it as polished as I can within the month, and then poll a few friends like you guys and some other people, and if it's all good and everyone's pretty happy with it, that will immediately be streamlined, and that will immediately go to assembly or mass production. So I would say that the AES hardware will be the next thing that will be mass produced, and there won't be quantities of 30 or 40 every other couple of weeks or something like that. So, you know, it's just a whole learning process. I was a systems engineer, you know, I'm a programmer by profession, and I don't have the sort of wisdom that Ste has as far as being a man is concerned. Or Nick, for that matter, or maybe even René, even though he is.
I think René is the champion of that. So we need to look to him.
Yeah, or or our Lord and Savior, Lord Artemio.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, my lord. But that's it. AES will be mass produced. Learned a bunch of stuff. That'll be quick. And as of now, you know, the projects I talked about before, those are still in the pipeline. I'm just trying to get everybody's orders in and everybody's orders out, and that's really all I have going right now. Just maintenance.
I have a question about these boards. When they come to you, how much work do you have to do before they can get shipped out?
So I went through a whole process with them, and this was sort of the deal breaker for a lot of these board houses that I went to, probably over a dozen. I spoke to over a dozen contractors just for this little stuff right here. And the main thing that was important to me was if we could employ some sort of test bed so that these could be, after assembly, they could be tested in some respect to make sure no opens, no shorts, no chips that are dead or they're shorting to ground or whatever like that. As far as what I have to do, when they come in, I will spot check maybe 15 or 20% of the inventory, physically testing them. I'll do a visual check, of course, to make sure everything looks good and kosher. But other than that, the extent of my responsibility, or of not my responsibility, but my involvement with them will be packaging, bagging, labeling, and shipping.
Because the one question I have based on this photo is that the low pass filter thing is not set to anything.
Yeah, that is correct, and that's going to be there will be an addendum in the documentation, and I'm glad you mentioned that, so I'll just go ahead and talk about it.
Well, yeah, okay, go ahead, but then I have a follow-up question.
Okay, so rather than me spending 3 seconds to short the solder strap per your own desires in life, when you receive the board, you'll short the solder strap per your desires in life. I actually ran into an issue where not a lot of people, but a sizable amount of people, they messaged me and they were asking, you know, hey, I didn't realize that the low pass filter was off by default. I'd rather have it on with the device that I use, and so that kind of became a problem. So rather than changing things around and saying before I send you the board, or rather than changing like the purchasing policy to state or stipulate, if you want the low pass for the low order filter on by default, please specify that per your order number. Fuck it, just leave it open, and just have very explicit instructions for them to follow. So if they want it, they can short it. If they don't want it, they can they can short. They can manipulate that solder strap either way, just like the TTL jumper.
So, like, one thing I think I mentioned back when you were still doing low quantities is that if you can manage putting a pull-up resistor on there and just having one solder strap, so by default it's always off, and then if somebody And then if you get stuff, you know, it's good for you to use directly without you messing with anything for your own mods. And then if somebody else wants to disable it, or if you want to disable it, you just do the one strap. But then you, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought about that, putting a pull-up on there that could just simply be shorted down to ground if you wanted it off or on. Just one strap. Certainly considered that. I know we discussed that, but my whole thing was, even though it's such a small board with such a low part count, I'm like, but goddamn, that's one more resistor. I'm a lazy bastard. So just put the solder strap on there. Put the dual end solder strap on there, and just, you know, it's a very simple thing. Either you short it this way or you short it that way. To me, it was immaterial. It was, you know, it really didn't make any difference either way. I thought both processes were just as simple. You're shorting one side of that strap. But I mean, I may still consider that, Steve. I may still consider it.
I mean, I think it makes sense because if you're installing this, you have a soldering iron out anyway, right?
Right. Exactly.
So,
I mean, that's exactly right. And the board, our prerequisite is soldering. So you're already soldering the board. What's the problem with adding just a drop of solder to the strap and configuring the output of the 7374 as you want it?
I guess
not a big deal.
My only concern is what we've all realized is that nobody reads anything,
and they're going to leave it open, right?
And the support tickets, extra support tickets you might generate for somebody not setting it to anything. When you don't set that to anything, it's a MOSFET gate floating, and you don't know, based on the capacitance at the gate, what
it's doing.
You don't know it could be
right.
One day it could go one way, one day it could go the other way. And that's, I guess my concern would be like the support nonsense that you could generate by not having it set to something because somebody failed to read instructions.
You know what? I totally 100% agree with you. And so maybe I'll take the 5 seconds to set the strap, or maybe I'll take the 10 minutes to revise the design. Put a pull-up on there that can make it go open, or make it go high, or make it go low or high.
Or you could go with it with how it is now for this run, and then based on feedback from run, then make a decision later if it's worth even changing anything.
To see what kind of trend there is. I totally agree with you.
I agree with Steve too. I mean, if the more you can hold people's hands, the better it is, I think.
Yeah, because well, that's one thing. I just want to say one last thing here. Somebody asked about the Sega Mega Video. Well, I got to tell you about the Sega Mega Video. I'm going to jump back on that soon. Steve and I are actually going to look at some Genesis and Master System stuff while he was down here touching me, but we were occupied with other things, like going to the doctor for antibiotics. But so that's the Sega Mega Video is still definitely, you know, the polish is still being put on that. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but as soon as that's finished, and it's tested, I have a couple of people, like the gentleman from I think Arcade maybe TV, and some other people who are wanting to check it out. As soon as other people that are kind of distinguished take a look at it and like it and provide feedback, that fucker is going to be open source, so anybody freely can print it, use it, enjoy it, and it's just, you know, I did that with the Super Nintendo sRGB board. It's free. I mean, it's I want you people to enjoy the shit. So there you have it.
Nice.
I'm jealous that Renee's drinking his cola from a wine glass and I got to use the 1 liter bottle.
It's a 750 milliliter bottle.
You just drink straight from that thing.
Yeah.
All right, Steve.
I guess one thing I could talk about is ESD testing, which I'm kind of looking into right now. I guess some context on why I'm even looking into this. We have these on our HU retrovision cables on the output. There are ESD protection diodes. For the reasoning behind that is the RCA connectors stick out, so you can touch them and cause ESD events. because the metal is exposed. And so there's ESD protection diodes like right on the output of the circuit board. So
ESD being electrostatic discharge.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
just wanted
Good
to
call.
clarify.
I even like.
I hate jargon, man.
Yeah. I
just
even
all
thought
assume
of
that we know it.
mentioning that, and
Yeah.
then I totally forgot about it when we're live, of course. And so yeah, the electrostatic discharge is, our bodies generate stuff. You go to the car, you touch the handle, and zap, right? Those you feel. There's other ones you don't feel, but they're still happening. And so to protect the circuitry inside, our ICs inside, like we have op amps on the outputs, they normally have a basic ESD structure, which is those diodes that we talked about with Renee's thing. And then we talked about last week how can HD retrovision cables go into a Y splitter? And I'm like, well, I block the leakage path. Well, blocking the leakage path also blocked the ESD path. So I had to my reasoning was I need to be safe, I should put external separate ESD diodes to take care of that, so we can get both things, get the splitting effect possible plus ESD protection. But those ESD diodes are kind of expensive, and so instead of just like guessing and throwing them down, I was thinking about like actually measuring ESD, and my boss at work, he's an awesome guy. He's worked for Midway back in the day and stuff, and he showed
Like
me
a zapper.
Yeah, he took a grill ignition lighter. I don't even know if this is going to show up because of the frame rate.
Put it to your body.
Oh yeah, we can see that.
But he took a grill ignition lighter, he put a terminal on it, and it's just some high voltage here. It's not totally controlled. It's not to like IEC specs. Here, I'll do it on my hair so you can see it better.
So wait, that thing is not like the human model ESD?
It's not necessarily. It's thousands of volts.
Put your tongue on it.
But I think having that, like the human body, there's a model they use called the human body model, and it has a lot of series resistance in it, and I still haven't measured this yet. It's a good, just basic thing to do instead of going to the testing lab and having them do everything official and be paying several $1,000s to get test reports and stuff. So I'm going to try zapping the RCA connector, all 5 of them, because all 5 lines are protected. And maybe a couple times reverse the polarity so I do positive and negative pulses. And I'm going to take the ESD diodes out. And I'm going to see how well it withstands without the extra ESD diodes. And we'll see what happens. And then maybe I can consider depopulating those on the next revision, because one thing I'm always afraid of after a year goes by and you order more stuff is our quotes change, right? Our costs change. They always go up. Yeah. And it'd be nice if the cost that goes up, and then I offset that by reducing the price of the ESD diodes. I don't have to put them there, and therefore, when we sell stuff on their store, the price stays stable, and we don't have to raise anything.
So Steve, in a past life, I had to get some USB devices out to standards testing, and one of the problems we had with ESD diodes on the USB was the capacitance it was adding to the data lines, right? You had different ratings of capacitance, whether you wanted full speed USB or high speed USB. So is that why the cost of your ESD diodes are so high? Is because you're looking for like a high frequency, low capacitance diode there?
That was one part of it. It was, I needed 5 bi-directional lines with a certain voltage range that's super tiny, and low capacitance. I think it was like 1 or 2 picofarads. It's really small.
Those are puffs.
Yeah, puffs. That's what the guy who made this for him. Well, not for me. Like, he let me borrow it. But
yeah, the old timers.
The old timers call puffs, which I started calling them puff too.
It's easier
because that's all I hang out. because at work, that's all these old Midway guys that have been in the industry for 20, 30 years. And, you know,
Legends, true legends.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just finding that diode was really hard, like to meet all those specs. If I couldn't find something like that, then I probably wouldn't have put anything down, or I don't know how laying out a board with something. That thing's tiny. Like there's a miracle that you can find something that tiny, but you know, because it's smaller, the less it can dissipate. So if there's something non-ESD, and this has happened to me before, because I had all these DC barrels on the bench, because I had splitters attached to it, and on the old consoles, the DC, the middle is ground and the outside is 9 volts. If that barrel touches the tip of the RCA connectors, bye-bye ESD diodes. They're toast. You got a short to ground on one of your lines, and you can't get rid of it. So that's another downfall too. If people aren't careful and they touch live voltage, they'll blow the cable up. It won't, like, the line that touches will be dead. It'll be a dead short ground.
Oh, cables don't blow up. What are you talking about?
Just flashcards.
And, well, never mind. We'll get into that later, boys.
We'll get to that. Yeah.
All right, Renee, your turn.
Okay, so I've been meaning to buy a new oscilloscope for a while, and I finally went ahead with the purchase. And I want to talk a bit about some of the ratings on an oscilloscope and how you go about actually selecting an oscilloscope. So I'll start with, in the past, for the longest time, I've been using this quality Tektronix oscilloscope. It's a TDS 220 2-channel 100 megahertz scope. The major drawback that I didn't like is that I couldn't take screen captures with this. So I always had to take a camera and take a shot of the screen. And that was really annoying me, because part of my plan for my website and for eventually Bob's Wiki is just to put, you know, a whole bunch of screen caps in and measurements of a whole bunch of different signals from the console, so that they're out there in the public domain for people to reference. And I can finally do that with the Rigol. How do you pronounce this? Is it Rigol? I think
It's Buick Regal, Renee.
Regal.
Yeah,
I
Buick
think
Regal.
I've been calling it Rigol. I think EV blog guy calls it Rigol.
Yeah.
Whatever. It doesn't.
Okay, I'm going to say Rigol because there's only one consonant, right? So the I should be long. Okay. So I bought this Rigol DS1054Z. Yes, Z.
Your microphone kind of went goofy.
Yeah, Renee, I can't hear you. You sound like you're shooting a porno. No.
Is it good?
No.
Nope.
No, it's not good. How dare you? Say something.
Test 1 2.
That's better.
It's better.
Okay, I did not change anything.
Weird. It's kind of like flickering back and forth now.
You can still hear him though, so go ahead.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Okay. So the Rigol and what I wanted what I wanted in a scope was a lot of channels. I thought 2 channels was not enough for me. For a while I was looking at the MSO. The MSO has the logic analyzers output here. Finally I settled on this Rigol 4-channel. Partly because it was only 400 Canadian dollars, which, you know, is practically nothing for you Yanks. And you can easily unlock all the features in it. So you can turn this 50 megahertz scope into a 100 megahertz scope with just an unlock code that you can find online. I thought that was brilliant. But so I'm saying, you know, 50 megahertz scope and whatnot. What does that mean? Well, I printed a sheet that kind of tries to illustrate what bandwidth actually is. And I know we could probably do some screenshots with OBS, but I thought this would be simpler. So so on the top is the actual signal that you'd feed into the scope, and then on the bottom would be what the scope can actually measure as you're approaching, you know, its bandwidth limitations. So if you're trying to measure a signal that's close to the bandwidth of the oscilloscope, you'd actually measure it as a lower amplitude, because the scope can no longer handle that high of a frequency. Now, on a 100 megahertz scope, I mean, the rule of thumb is you probably want to keep your measurements down to 20 megahertz and lower. I would say like a ×5 rule is pretty good. And not to be confused with with Nyquist sampling rates, where they would say that you only need to sample twice as high as the frequency, because, and here I printed another sheet to illustrate that, is if you're trying to measure a rise time on a signal that only has a couple of sample points on the edge, you're distorting that rise time quite significantly, right? So you want to have a lot of measurement points on the rise time to be able to measure between the 10% and the 90%, right? So I think for most of the applications that we're doing in retro consoles, I think 20 megahertz is a pretty decent range to have.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is this oscilloscope only does, my older one only did 2,500 sample points per channel, right? So the entire waveform is only described in 2,500 sample points, whereas these Rigols, I think they have 24 megs of RAM shared across the 4 channels. So depending on the time division that you're selecting, you can have a pretty large sample of your waveform, and only a small portion of that will be displayed on the screen, but you can analyze and output the rest of the waveform on the USB and analyze it on the computer.
That computer tool looks pretty awesome for those scopes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've messed around with it, but
Ste and I got shocked.
I haven't had the time yet, but it actually has like a network interface on the back as well, and you can control it via the computer. So I'm pretty excited for that.
I think if you could take GIFs using the software, which is really cool, to be able to take motion caps instead of just still screen caps.
Yeah.
See, go ahead. I'm sorry, René. Go ahead, my lord.
Those are all things I want to try. I only got this 2 days ago, right? So I've done a few measurements on my graphics boosters, and that's about it. But I really want to use this oscilloscope to its full potential, and even I mean, with 4 channels, you can do some basic logic analysis too. I mean, you can definitely analyze some SPI and I2C buses that way. So.
Have you done any testing to sort of validate how good the calibration is coming out of the box, René?
I don't have any generators that I'd be able to compare it against, like a known good output that it would be able to measure.
You can make some. I'll send you one. I've got a couple that I made. What's interesting though about that scope, and it kind of that particular model, it kind of motivates me to kind of upgrade, because the Rigols that Ste and I have, they're pretty nice, but Ultrascope is the client software that you can use, and one of the what I thought it could do, but what it can't do, are GIFs, and that would be hugely beneficial to me to show and explain things to people. But nonetheless, yeah. I'm just like you. I had a Tektronix back in 1976, and it died, and I got an HP. An older HP off of Jason from Buttsex or GameTech, and it served me well for a while. But just like you, I had to take Polaroids of still samples, right? And then I would measure I would see the graduations, and I would measure, and I would compare later. Digital storage is just, God, that's such a, if anything, that is just, thank you, Lord Jesus, wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't even care about the GIF or GIF, however you choose to pronounce that, functionality. What I care about is how many sample points can it output. Like, yeah. Ste has been sending me CSV files with like 500,000 points, and that's like super useful. We wouldn't be able to do the things that we're doing in measuring what we want to measure without that type of density. So that's a huge gain.
For sure.
Yeah, I'll pull up the so it has it's 24 million points with the upgraded, with the unlock code that I put in there. It's not specified whether that's shared across the 4 channels or not. So, but if you're only using one channel, to measure a signal, then you obviously get those 24 million points.
Excuse me. So I've got a question, Renee, real quick. The 50 well, in its stock sort of firmware state, what is the waveform, the bandwidth resolution, as opposed to what do you gain by putting in that unlock code? Because that's essentially all you're doing.
Yes, elaborate on this unlock code.
Okay, so unlock, you can just Google hack this model number, hack Rigol DS1054Z, and you'll immediately find tutorials that are, one instruction short, and that's all it is. When you buy it, it's a 50 megahertz scope with 12 million points, and it has no serial decode capabilities. And there's a few other modules, I forget exactly what they are, but the unlock doubles the bandwidth to 100 megahertz. It doubles the sample memory from 12 megahertz to 12 million points to 24 million. And it gives you all the serial decode, like the SPIs, the I2Cs, the CAN bus, all that kind of stuff.
That is fucking crazy.
And I've been using the word hack, but I use that term very loosely, because all it was I took the serial number of my scope, I put it into a web page, I inputted the options that I wanted, which was just all of them, and I was outputted a key, which I just input into the scope, and that's it. It was as simple as that. There was nothing else I needed to do. I took it out of the box, and within 5 minutes, I had it unlocked.
That's fucking crazy. That's glorious.
Nick, can we get one, please?
Yeah, Nick, can I get one too? Daddy.
Sorry,
it
what?
probably costs like $10 US. I mean,
but you said Renee, like 400 odd Canadian dollars.
Yeah, I got it for 400 Canadian from electrometers.ca.
That's like 1/100th of a Bitcoin, right?
And the only other thing I want to mention is, for the longest time, I was debating getting a mixed signal oscilloscope or just a regular oscilloscope with only analog channels. And a mixed signal is, I'm not sure if I explained it yet, is it has digital only signals in the input. You usually have either 8 or 16 digital only signals. And for a while, I really wanted one of those oscilloscopes. And I decided I'm going to go with the 4-channel instead, because this Rigol has and probably most scopes have it, but I mean, you have to use it properly, is it has a trigger out, right? So whatever trigger I decide to use on my oscilloscope, I can output that to a different logic analyzer, like maybe a USB one that I'm using on the computer. So I'd be able to correlate on a time basis signals that I captured by my Rigol to a different, a 16 or a 32 channel logic analyzer on the computer that's going to have way more sample points, so way more memory, and a much larger screen to look at all those digital signals than I would have on this small 7-inch screen. So I thought it made more sense to split the functionality of the analog analysis on the oscilloscope and the digital analysis on the computer, where I think the computer's probably better suited to do that anyways.
Totally agree.
I just want to take objection to you referring to 7 inches as small. That's all. Anyway.
So, okay, that's it. I'm done.
Whatever.
We've been demonetized.
Yeah.
Here come the letters.
So should we go with our positive topic first?
Wait, did everybody go?
Hell no.
Yeah, everyone went.
Okay.
We don't have Bob this week to...
That's what it is. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. Yep. Thought that was kind of short.
All right, we were gonna go around the table one more time, real quickly, and discuss, or just, I guess, recommend books that we think are very valuable for this field. So, who wants to start off with that?
Can I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'll be very quick. This will take maybe a minute. Okay, if you're into, if you're kind of one of those guys that want to do some machine language programming and dump all that interpreted bullshit, I consider this one of the Z80 Bibles. Okay, the Z80 microprocessor. This is a college book that I bought quite a while ago. It's from the Merrill Publishing Group, and the author here is Ramesh Gayankar. and I highly recommend this for Z80 hardware. Now, as for 6502 stuff, like you'd find in your Atari and NES, Lance Leventhal wrote what I consider the Bible, which is the 6502. This is a very worn copy that I have that I've used religiously over the years. Now, if you're into PSP or any sort of RISC architecture, well, pseudo-RISC, this MIPS book, this is another college piece of literature here, used mostly in schools. This is a fantastic resource for MIPS assembly language. So if you're doing anything on the hardware level with MIPS, great book. Final book is this.
One question. Is N64 also MIPS?
It could be if you dream about it.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay.
Absolutely. Final book here, what I also consider a Bible. This is another 80s edition, 68,000 family, hardware interfacing, and assembly language, machine language programming book. Anything you want to know about the 68K? I think up to the 68040. This is a great book. This is by Willie Ford and Willie Top. So, yeah, big Indian.
Indian's the only way to go.
High order first. Anyways, those are my that's sort of like a little programming shtick, and those are my recommendations.
Well, what consoles are the 68K for people to?
Sega Genesis, Atari, ST, Amiga 500. The sound controller of the Saturn is a 68K. God, there's a lot of things that use the 68,000. Let's see.
Neo Geo.
Neo Geo AES MVS uses
Jaguar
68K.
has a 68K.
Jaguar uses a 68K. I would say that the most prevalent system that really uses a 68K to really drive logic, though, would be the Sega Genesis, as far as what we just discussed. You know, it's important to know.
That's
in
the
my
blast
opinion.
processing.
That's what it is.
That's right.
That's correct. That's correct. So, you know, I don't know if you guys are into that kind of thing, but there you have it. Like I had to do a lot of MIT stuff. You know, I worked for a healthcare. I worked for a company that bought distressed hospitals and other places like that, and a lot of the technology that they used was proprietary and it was very expensive. And so when new functionality needed to kind of be shat out of things, it was all MIPS based. It was a lot of this low power architecture like this right here. And boy, I had to really cut my teeth on MIPS assembly language rather than C or anything like that to really get these things going. So if you're a game designer, if you want to be a programmer of sorts for sort of vintage technology, these 4 books, and maybe I'll post in the comments the maybe Amazon links or something like that. But that's all I have.
All right, I'll go real quick. I'm a digital signal engineer by training, so that's kind of where my focus is going to be. I think we've talked about this book before as the Holy Bible in DSP. It's the Oppenheim Schaefer Buck book. You can obviously get cheaper versions of this if you're willing to get the international versions, but this will teach you everything you need to know about the basics of DSP. Highly recommend this. Another thing that I think is understudied by people in this field, I mean, obviously if you go to a university and take EE courses, you'll have to do this, but for those of people who are self-taught, I think maybe the most important thing that might get overlooked from time to time is probability. And understanding how to formulate things in terms of probability instead of deterministic functions. So I really like this book. It's by Stark and Woods. Super valuable to me in my career at every place I've worked. And last one, I really like this book. It's statistical signal processing. This is part 2, detection theory. This is all about how do you determine whether there's a signal present or whether it's just noise. It's a very simple to describe topic that is a fairly thick book. There's also a different volume of this. It's all about estimation theory. It's also good if you want to understand how to look at a signal that you measure and estimate parameters of it. So if you want to know like mean and standard deviation of something, but a whole lot more complicated of a field than that, obviously. This is a really good book too, and this is by Stephen M.K. So those are my three. Renee?
Okay, I'm gonna go. I have the unfortunate luck of keeping all my books at the office at the school where I work, so I don't actually have any technical books here, but I'm still gonna wing this. So the first book that I'm gonna recommend is a book to unlock the power of all your favorite video games.
Hell yeah!
The Game Genie, right? This works on over 290 popular video games, and you can do so much stuff with this. I think this was actually released by a Canadian company. It was available in Canada for a lot longer than it was in the States. Suggested retail price of $8.95. Right, that's brilliant.
Shameless plug. Since you mentioned that, we use the Game Genie to do some awesome hacks, and we have videos on our YouTube channel. It's a sweet device when you understand how it works.
Yeah, and for people who don't quite understand how this works, is the Game Genie kind of just does an intercept of memory addresses and replaces the data at that memory address. Nothing totally complicated, but
Poking bytes.
Yeah. My next recommendation: Nintendo Power, the old ones.
Yes, right? Sir.
These are brilliant.
I have that one over the other roof.
I've got the entire library.
Well, I picked this one for a particular reason, because on page 35 of this book, there's best times for Mario Circuit 2 on Super Mario Kart. And if you look at the very last record holder, that's me, René Richard, from Kapuskasing, Ontario. Right?
Wow.
So if you have...
I want to go get my issue now. It's like, look at that. What page is it?
If you have volume 90 of Nintendo Power, page 35, I'm in there.
Okay.
I'm in there.
Let me get in the archives here.
History in the making, I tell you.
Does issue 90?
Yeah.
Volume 90.
Okay.
It has Donkey Kong Country 3 on the cover. Right? And the final book that I'm going to recommend is, because I'm quite an avid guitar player, is going to be Wild String Them by John Petrucci. I think John Petrucci is the best guitarist out there, right? So you can really get your chops down by following the exercises in this book, right? I mean, he's doing the make it look hard face and whatnot, so you could clearly tell he's a good player by that face. That's it. Okay, humor's done now.
Excellent.
Did we prep Renee on this segment?
No. I would have brought a book from work. I have a whole bunch of programming books at work.
So,
whose segment was this? Was this you, Ste?
Yeah, this is a segment that I came up with, and
Nice.
I kind of like specifically worded it in such a way where I kind of wanted different books than this.
Oh, did I fuck up?
No, it's totally fine. I said books. I didn't say textbooks, and I said in this type of, it'll help people in this type of field. And I seriously thought Nick was going to go with rework.
Okay, I mean, I would have had I been thinking along those lines.
Okay. So if you're starting some type of business or anything like that, this is a must read, and it reads super quick. Just throw it on the toilet tank.
Yeah, it's like a 3 to 4 poop book.
Yeah. It's really easy to read. The sections are like a couple pages, and they're all encapsulated. Like you could read them out of order if you want, but highly recommended. This is actually recommended to me. Actually, it was given to me. This physical book was given to me by somebody who attended me and Nick's talk. We made it a hackerspace about going from Kickstarter to end product. And he was like so appreciative of the time we spent to actually do a presentation and talk about all those like little minor details that he gave this to me and some other stuff. He was really excited about that. And then another thing that I think is really interesting, it's legal stuff for this type of field. And even though this says video game development or legal guide to video game development, I read I'm about halfway done, and it talks about really basic things that is good for anybody in business, and because we still deal with video games, all of us in some way, it kind of applies. So things about learning what trademarks, copyright, patents are, all those things. It goes over it, agreements, NDAs, contractor agreements, all that type of stuff. This is a really important book, I think, and it's by the American Bar Association has published it, but it's edited by Ross Dannenberg. Um, and it was recommended to us by a guy in a panel at MagFest who's a lawyer there at the legal panel. He actually, I think he wrote a chapter in here. But these two books are the non-technical, but I think like anybody who's going into producing things and being like a creative person, I think these are the really important. And of course,
can I just interrupt real quick? The guys who wrote Rework, I highly recommend following them on Twitter. They're very interesting guys. Daniel Hennemeyer Henson, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's the guy who developed Ruby on Rails.
Oh, really?
Oh, nice.
So
that's cool.
And yeah, so that. And these both the guys who wrote that book they created a company called Basecamp. It used to be called 37 Signals back when they were a web development team, and now they're a productivity suite company. And the other guy's Jason Fried. Jason Fried, I think, posts more interesting stuff if you had to choose between the two on Twitter. They're very interesting guys to follow, and they also are now. I don't know how involved they will be, but they have a podcast called the Rework Podcast that just started maybe a week ago. And the podcast is just interesting topics on startups. Things like just like building in profitability from day one, all sorts of like important things that they're very passionate about that they think as that essentially Silicon Valley and the startup culture is doing totally wrong, which is a lot of what that book is about.
That's what I was gonna say. Like the gist of this book is like there's all these like things that are built into like corporate society that are kind of like worthless and destructive, and this is a fresh look at everything, especially in this new age of technology and the internet, that you don't need a lot of these practices that have just been done kind of because they've been done in the past.
Yeah.
So, I can't have books and not talk about nerd books too. Like the other people, like Voultar skewed towards machine language and assembling, Nick's skewed towards mathematics. I'm obviously skewed toward analog electronics. And I know we talked about last week art of electronics.
I want that so bad, Steve.
Even just the first 3 chapters on like resistor caps, diodes, and transistors. Read those, and the reason why I'm recommending these books that I'm talking about is they're very they're not like super academic. There's not tons of formulas and stuff. They're very practical. Everybody will be able to understand this. The guys who write this are really good at instructing this type of stuff for anybody. That's why this is in like every hacker space, and it's talked about like on Adafruit and SparkFun. It's something hobbyists can really get into really quickly. And of course, you could get the international version that's super cheap. That's fine too. The other thing is video signals. Of course, I'm into, and I think this is one of the best books. I've read this cover to cover. This is made by Charles Poynton. He's from Canada too, so yay, represent, right, René? I read this cover to cover. Really good at not a lot of formulas, not a lot of math. Concepts are covered in really thoroughly, and you really understand. Like one thing he does really good in here is explain like the difference between brightness and contrast and gamma. I used to not understand it at all. Read this, makes total sense now. And then Yeah, that's my favorite video book. I like this one too, but it's more of a reference. Most people talk about video books. I like the other one better if you just want to understand.
I've got the old one of that.
Yeah. This is fourth. I think you have third.
I don't know. Yeah. I've got the third edition.
It's a very good reference, but I mean, this is something I didn't read cover to cover. If I need to look something up, I go to chapter, blah, blah, blah. And then the last thing I want to talk about, and we might touch on this later with the questions, is Analog Devices has 2 books that are available for free on PDF. I mean, I have the physical copy of this one. This one's op-amp applications. I read this cover to cover, but what I did is I took the PDFs they gave you for free, and I ran it through this grad student's software that chops up the PDFs into Kindle usable PDFs. And I read the whole thing on a Kindle at the gym on the elliptical and the bike. I read this entire book. This book is 800 pages, but very useful information about analog electronics, about op-amp applications, op-amps in general, just like the output structures of op-amps, so you kind of know what the outputs look like. You need to do some sort of analysis. And they also have another free book called Basic Linear Design, which is also free on the Analog Devices website in PDF form. And so, yeah, there's a lot of cheap, really awesome options for books that don't require a lot of technical background. Is kind of what
I'm sure that 800 pages is like a light, brisk read too, right?
It took a long. It's 800 pages of this size when you chop it into into Kindle pages.
3,000 Kindle pages.
Like 3,000 Kindle pages.
It took me through 3 shits to get through this baby.
You don't have to read this cover to cover. I read it cover to cover because this is like a topic that I need to know in and out.
Right.
So there's really good info in those books, and they're free. That's why I'm kind of like talking about those. Like, you get the Art of Electronics for really cheap international. This old edition of the Point On book is super cheap. The old edition's better too because it has composite video in it, which is not in the newer edition. And these Analog Device books are free.
Yeah, I mean, I think with all the books, especially textbooks, at a minimum you can get a cheaper international paper, like super thin, like the type of paper you'd roll a joint with. Not that anyone here does that.
It's like that rice paper on those treats that they have at the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Melt when you put water on it, it just melts.
Yeah, exactly. But you can get cheaper editions or free, possibly, for some of them. Of the ones I recommended, I mean, I think Probability is probably the only one that you actually should read cover to cover, and that's just because I'm really passionate about people understanding probability, because it's the most abused and misunderstood subject.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Should we just, like, blow it out now?
What? The vagina? What are you talking about?
I'm ready with the Kapton tape and whatnot, so...
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Let's just fucking do it, man. Let's just do it.
All right. So, I think the next thing we wanted to address, and maybe this will be all we address, maybe we'll skip some of the other group topics that we kind of had brainstormed on, and then just go to Q&A after this. It's something that we thought about talking about last week, but we wanted to see how it played out. Or not last week, last podcast, 2 weeks ago. We wanted to see how it played out for a couple weeks, and already the results are starting to come in, and it's not good. I think it's... we've kind of been forced into talking about it more than anything. Not because we necessarily want to poop on people, although it's totally fun. But because we want to stop people from destroying their consoles. And that is the unfortunate incident of MetalJesusRocks doing a total puff piece clickbait view grab about the Zeldaxpro GameCube HDMI video thingy, whatever he's calling it now, plug and play. For those who don't know, there have already been some reports that these things were shorting out and blowing up GameCubes, which is like a favorite topic of ours, is how to destroy your retro console, apparently. Most recently, this happened to MetalJesusRocks console himself, in a twisted fate of cosmic
irony.
justice.
Irony.
Yeah, real irony there. So, I don't know. Does anyone want to talk about like what the main issue with that connector piece is? And
Well, let me preface. I'll start it out. And let's just add to it. So a while ago, this guy Zeldaxpro Pro, he posted on several different forum sites of this idea he had of doing a plug-and-play version of Unseen's of the HDMI of the component cable replacement design that Unseen released openly for anybody to use. Now, this was a plug-and-play design that didn't incorporate any sort of real mechanical connector. What it is it's a sandwich layer of two PCBs on headers with fingers on the end that sort of interface into the GameCube. And so people were pretty critical. There you go. That's it, Renee. There was a consensus formed, and people were quite critical of this design being erroneous and dangerous. The design of not using a design that doesn't incorporate any sort of true real mechanical connector. There are no sort of blocking guides on this layered sandwiched PCB. So it just freely fits in that port, the digital video port. Now, if you move that around, those pins aren't locked into place, so they're going to move around. They're going to move around freely. And what's happening is people are either they're nudging their GameCubes or they're shifting this little dongle around in the back, and it's shorting power. It's shorting the voltage rail to data lines and other things that essentially fries the GameCube. Now, despite the plea of the community for him to revise this and to make this,
he did revise it. He did revise it once.
He revised it, but he really didn't address.
Yeah,
sure, he revised it, but in no way did he thoroughly address the grave concerns that people had. So I really don't consider that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to be clear that he did try to make it a tighter fit, but he didn't properly design a connector with guides and
right.
I'm looking at the pinout of this connector right now, what the signals are, whatnot, and probably what's happening is on pin 5 there's a 12-volt signal. And right next to it, there's clock select and the data 0, right? So I mean that 12-volt signal is probably going on one of those digital outputs.
Sure, it's just being bridged over.
Yeah, I don't know why you need 12 volts on that connector, but
go ahead, Steve.
Just one clarification, because I'm not sure how this on what device are the spring-loaded pins on? Are they in the GameCube connector?
They're in the connector. They're in the male plug.
The GameCube. So Steve, on the GameCube, it looks almost identical to the analog AV, except the pitch is smaller. It's like a PCB.
So it's flat on there, and you're supposed to have like a spring-loaded pin on the mating connector that's in
correct.
the official GameCube cable to push up against that flat edge.
To make contact. Correct.
Yeah.
So
like
how
a higher pitched version of the analog AV.
He's using the tension. When he sandwiches this with a header, Steve, he's using the tension that's created in the gap between the top layer and the bottom layer board, and it fits in that slot. It's not a tight fit, but it does make contact. So that's the only thing that's creating that. Go ahead.
So are you saying you have edge finger to edge finger, like
correct?
Flat?
That's exactly right. Totally perpendicular, totally interfacing in that way. And again, the design of this thing is totally symmetrical. So there's nothing keeping you from inverting this thing and putting it in an upside down, which is again a plausible disaster. So nonetheless, the point is that he was amply warned, and there were critical suggestions here that he really didn't He really didn't. I guess I don't know. He didn't pay any attention to it. He released it. MetalJesusRocks got his hands on it without, doing his. I mean, listen. MetalJesusRocks, regardless of the product, he should have vetted that thing that he reviewed, and he should have done his due diligence, and he didn't. And I'm sorry, that's just a clickbaity ass video that he made.
Yeah, so he knew that by being the first person to break this, he could get a shitload of views, which means a shitload of ad revenue. I assume he should have known better, to the point where if he really wanted to do a video about this, and he knows he doesn't have the technical expertise to evaluate something that is obviously still looks like a prototype, he should not be doing that without going around to find somebody more knowledgeable. It was a huge mistake.
My impression was, when I was watching the MetalJesusRocks video, is at one point he opens the the device, and it's wrapped in Kapton tape, and it kind of looks horrible, right? And he goes, "Oh, you can tell the build quality is really great," and he's showing this Kapton tape device, and I thought that was just hilarious. Like, you have zero qualifications to evaluate, the quality of this product, and you're telling everyone that it's great, but it's wrapped in fucking Kapton tape. It's clearly a prototype, right?
Well, here's my problem with that. Right immediately when he released that video, and this isn't anecdotal and this isn't hearsay. People actively warned MetalJesusRocks about the plausible repercussions of using that. And his response to every one of those detractors, I guess is what he would consider them as, it was pretty canned. And he said that he wasn't having any problems whatsoever, therefore it was fine.
Yep,
well, he only had a problem until his GameCube fried. And then after the fact, he didn't even have what I consider the decency to at least unlist or temporarily take the video down until he could make a proper follow-up video. So people are still seeing this thing, and I guess it's for that ad revenue and that traffic, but that's a real bullshitty thing to do, man.
Yeah, like a pinned comment at the top of your comments page is not sufficient. And to say that I'm going to make a video in about a week to warn people,
he's disgusting.
It's malpractice, especially given the size of his audience. It's really unfortunate. I'm actually more upset that he did this than I would be at Zeldaxpro, because I mean, that kid's like, what, 22? He probably got.
Well, he's a kid.
He probably got sucked into this by the dollar signs.
Someone in the chat has it all figured out. MetalJesusRocks can't take the video down. He's got to pay for a new GameCube.
Yeah.
Well, here's my thing. I want to make this very clear. The difference between Zelda XP Pro's sort of situation and MetalJesusRocks is MetalJesusRocks is like a 40-something-year-old man, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Zelda XP Pro is a kid, and I don't think that, regardless of whatever he ignored, there was no malice or there were no ill intentions for releasing that. He shouldn't have done it, but he did it. And I don't think that he was just saying, fuck you guys, doesn't matter, people are going to buy it. MetalJesusRocks was thoroughly warned as a content provider. He makes a video. People are still telling him maybe it's not such a good idea. He's saying that he doesn't have a problem, therefore there's nothing to there is nothing. There's nothing to say. He only has a problem until his shit fucks up, and then after the fact, he doesn't even have the I guess what I would consider the decency to take that video down until he's able to thoroughly and properly address this. That's the difference between those two. So I just call them how I see it, folks, and that's some serious bull fucking shit, in my opinion.
So how often does this stuff happen? Is this going to happen more and more now that more like hobbyist retro products are happening? Or...
Go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry. I've talked enough.
I was just gonna say there's a number of these YouTubing channels out there that are happy to shill a product that they can get for free, and I'm really getting sick of. I do this for research purposes. I go out there and I look up these YouTube videos that are painful to watch, honestly. of them reviewing these products that they got for free, you know, clone consoles and that type of stuff. And I've never seen a negative review of anything. Like, honestly, sure. It's insane. Like, clearly some things are not designed well and yet are getting glowing reviews. Sega Genesis flashback. But in any case, yeah, to answer Steve's point, I think that this there's fault on both sides, and the people developing these things need to not get lured into this, you know, promise of fame and glory from these YouTubers with 1 million followers. You know, just give me your product for free. I'll get 200,000 views. I mean, my biggest criticism of Zeldaxpro, and full disclosure, I had talked to him earlier, and I wanted to get a you know, a prototype of this so I could tear it apart and look at it and give him feedback, but it never went down for whatever reason. I don't know. I never heard back from him. Kind of coincided with the release of this video. But my biggest criticism of him is he should have gone out to somebody he trusted who's done something like this before and gotten feedback about what could possibly happen with this mess of going to a YouTuber like this. Like, he was doing these one-offs previously, and then all of a sudden had 250,000 people just get told that GameCube component cables were worthless now. Sell them on eBay because you can buy this thing. And he's only got the production capacity to make 12 of these. Like, forget the fact that the design is not perfected. He's only got the capacity to make 12 of these a day, supposedly. And that's not including time spent to help people with issues like support tickets. I mean, there's a whole lot of shit that you got to do besides make product. And so there's no way he could possibly have filled that demand, even if it was a perfected design. So this was like a disaster on all sides, in my opinion. Although, like I said, I think MetalJesusRocks as a 40-year-old man should have known better about this.
Well, you know, from my view, and when I kind of zoom out and just look at the broad landscape of what YouTubing is, especially in the gaming community, I've noticed there's a consistent trend with YouTubers, and I'm not saying this disrespectfully, this is just the truth, but there's a consistent trend with YouTubers who have no qualifications or experience, yet tout and puff up product, often trying to give erroneous technical explanations and things like that. And I mean, I don't want to name drop, but we kind of poke at the guy a little bit. I'm sure he's a decent guy in real life, but
there's a reason that he got fired from the podcast, and now I've replaced him, right?
That's exactly right. That's why we cloned him. You know, figure it out. People are. This has been happening, and he's a big time offender of that. But I guess the question is, to combat that, what do people like us do? What do we do? Do we do anything, or do we try to rail against that and better inform people? Because let me just say this really quick. Somebody made a video talking about those cheap Chinese SCART to HDMI, RGB to HDMI adapters. After that video, I probably had 100 emails in the span of 3 weeks of people asking me about them and why they were so shitty when they got them, if there was something I could do to maybe mod those cheap RGB to HDMI converters to make them work better. I don't have time to do that. And if somebody would just, if people weren't just erroneously saying things that weren't true, my time would be better spent doing other things. So is it worth our time to really sort of combat that in some respect and try to better inform people so their money is better spent and they actually know what it is that they're buying? But that goes with anything. But I mean, listen, something has to happen here.
I mean, I think that's the point of this podcast, but the fact of the matter is we have 600 subscribers, and some of these people have 100,000 or 1 million subscribers, and we're fighting a losing battle at the moment. And this type of content can't compete with
We can't compete with sensationalism. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can't be. We're not the celebrity. I mean, we're not the celebrity, and we certainly I don't think we have any aspirations to be anything like that. We're just a bunch of old fucktard engineers or whatever. So, but is there anything else that we can do? Do you think other than this podcast to maybe should we reach out to these people? I've tried reaching out to a couple of these people, and they wanted to have. I was very kind and cordial, but they wanted to have clearly nothing to do with me. You know, a lot of these people are so high on those pedestals. It's like, wow, you're really going to fuck a bunch of people over and misinform them for the sake of traffic to your shitty YouTube channel? Really? I'm speaking very candid about this, but it really infuriates the hell out of me.
I mean, if some of those people's livings depend on it, then yeah, that's probably what's going to keep happening. Like, people abandon their jobs and they have Patreons and they have YouTube ad revenue, and their livelihood depends on getting people to watch their videos. Sure. And so if you can create a video whose title is "The End of GameCube Component Cables, Finally a New Solution," that's like an important thing. You'll rake in that revenue for that month. So
right. So you're really what it is it's you're ultimately you're in a lot of respects you're battling their livelihood.
Yeah, and I think I don't know. Maybe we just need to title all of our podcasts as really clickbaity stuff.
Well, we need a few more things. We need unboxings.
Yeah, that's right. Now, top 10s.
Hidden gems.
Yeah,
everyone loves hidden gems. I mean, top 10 hidden Rigol gems, right?
Yeah, that's right.
This 50 megahertz scope into a 100 megahertz scope. That's a good video.
I can get a sex change.
Yeah. I mean,
I can help out.
and I'm the token foreign guy, so.
Yeah.
Stay alert.
Your problem is more of just not wearing enough eye makeup, not. In any case.
I'm sorry. I just want to say this real quick. Nerdly Pleasures said something that I just thought was incredibly just perfect. There is no real recourse against a YouTuber who does a poor review. He's right. There is no accountability. So, I mean, God, he just said it best. What else is there to say?
So you can't fight that the YouTuber side, but at least for this specific scenario, which was a hobbyist type project, I feel like we can make an impact there, and I think we have with the beveled edges. People ask about that now when they're making cartridges for homebrew titles. So I think we can't help with the big YouTubers covering stuff, and we can't help with Raspberry Pi console things that are huge. But at least on hobbyist side, smaller type of projects, not even just hobby, smaller type of projects, I feel like we are making some sort of impact.
Yeah, you're right, Steve. I mean, after I released the flashcard article, my goal, and I think it was successful, is that people are sending me a whole bunch of board scans of, this is a repro I bought. Is it okay, right? And I look at the part numbers, and I can tell them if it's a 5-volt or a 3-volt board. Some people have even sent me board scans of repros that are made on Hazel PCBs. I think that's fucking horrible, right? I mean, if we could at least stop all boards from being, Hazel and not beveled, I mean, that's a really good impact thus far.
And hopefully this is something that we can make an impact on using Bob's Retro RGB 2.0, whatever it may be called. That's the type of stuff that needs to be on there. But even still, it's a small audience comparatively. So, and I mean, I agree we are making an impact, but growing the impact still matters. And I think we have to think about ways to do that. And I don't want to obviously start making 10-minute clickbaity videos about how flash carts are killing your retro consoles. But
they are.
But we in general, like, we talk about this offline. We don't like having to talk about, like, on the podcast, oh, okay, this is the shitty product this month that is doing harm. Like, we don't like talking about shitty products. Like, it sucks. We don't want to do that. But
yeah, we want to talk about cool things. But
I'd much rather pimp my Game Genie book than
that's
that.
right.
Well, I think the point is that everybody here in their own disciplines, we all have a lot better things or more constructive things than we can do with their time, especially when it comes to answering an overwhelming amount of erroneous email. Not because the customer or whoever are stupid. This is what they've been told. They saw a YouTube video of of guy X or girl X talking about something that's in reality really sucks. The video has 20,000 likes and 100 dislikes. Obviously, there must be some validity to that video. So why do I have any reason not to believe it? If it was really that crappy, wouldn't there be a lot more dislikes? You know, I mean, you just got to get into the mentality of these people, and that's certainly understandable. So yeah, I think all of us. None of us really want to shit on anybody. It's just, it's you know, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You know, that's all I had to say about my body.
So Michael's workshop.
Oh yeah.
Michael's workshop asked. I assume this was directed at me and Ste, because we've had this question about 1,000 times since we started the company. Was, could we investigate doing a GameCube component cable? And the answer is yes, and we've thought about it, and we don't want to do it, and we were hoping that like somebody's solution would pan out. Of course, if we were going to do it, we would design it from the ground up and not just use somebody else's development. But the real problem is the connector piece, and that's like why we don't want to do it. That's a huge investment. Like, you're talking a order of magnitude of money that we don't want to spend if we don't have to. You know, machining tools for that type of connector, you have to sell a lot of units to get payback on that, and that's you know, we're doing okay as a company. We're not failing, but we're not at the point where I feel comfortable risking the company on a GameCube connector at this point. It's a very expensive proposition, and that's why Zelda X Pro or XP Pro, whatever it is going with this sandwich board, because doing a real connector is super, super expensive. And
let's be fair. I mean, you can say what you want, the lack of updates or whatever. I mean, there are a few people who have been upset, I guess, with badass consoles. But by God, at least he's trying to do it right. And you know, according to him, based on the Twitter updates that I've seen, he's making a real connector and he's putting his money where his mouth is. And he is trying to do it to the best of his ability and the way it should be done. So you have to respect that.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason I didn't mention is because I honestly don't know what the status is of that. I mean,
nobody does.
So
I don't know.
He may be along the way and have, you know, fronted that kind of money to do it. I really don't know, and if he did, that's awesome, and I hope it's successful and works out, because neither me or Steve want to go down that route if we don't have to. It's just not something we want to approach, but.
Just buy a PAL GameCube and use the SNES cable.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, hopefully Badass Consoles comes out with something that's awesome, but I mean, people know that the communication out of him has been sparse, so I can't comment on. I don't know anything about it right now. That's why I kind of left it out.
Well, I mean, I put it in there, but yeah, let me say unequivocally, I have no idea where that is or what's going on. I think Bob said it the other day on his podcast. Maybe it was Bob, maybe it's somebody else. He knows just as much as anybody else does. So there are no updates that I'm privy to. So
I mean, he posted an email chain with China, I believe, but I actually didn't read it myself. But I think it explained like a lot of the delays. But I mean, again, I don't know to what degree like the connector, has he gotten a prototype? I don't know anything where it's at. So,
Right.
But I mean, at least I know that he's trying to do it the right way.
Right, and that's commendable. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what should be done. And unfortunately, people just don't want to. They want to sell it. They want to make money, but they don't want to spend money to make money. Unfortunately, so makes sense.
And it's a lot of money to spend to make money for this thing.
It is, and I guess to me, it's really, it comes down. It's a moral conundrum.
I mean, we are looking at retooling an existing PlayStation connector for which they can copy most of it, and that is expensive, right? So it's non-trivial amount of money.
So somebody mentioned 3D printing in the chat. So I jumped onto Thingiverse and I'm having a look at some of the available design files for 3D printing digital port on the GameCube. Some of them actually look like they could be reproducible, but I mean, what a lot of people don't realize with 3D printing is that it's extremely slow. Even something as small as a GameCube digital connector will probably take at least an hour or two to print in high quality on a reasonable or on an affordable printer, right? So it's not something that is DFM. It's not designed for manufacture, right? It's good for prototyping.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't want to go to mass production with a 3D printed connector.
Also, how do you print spring-loaded gold contacts?
How do you embed that?
I don't understand.
That's the hard part is the teeth, right?
Yeah,
you can't do that.
Put the link I'm looking at in the chat here. I mean, the guy put in pins. I'm not sure where the pins come from, but okay. He says the pins I use inside this connector are pulled from a PCI connector. So I mean, someone on their own could make a prototype that probably works, and that would be safe from the point of view of not shorting the 12 volt to the data line. But it's definitely not DFM.
Right.
Even with the sandwich, even with the sandwich design, which is disgusting, by its own accord, certainly there's something that he could at least do to key this fucking thing so that you couldn't put it in an inverted position. I mean, that's a huge problem, dude. How in your mind could you even fathom the idea of releasing something that if it was just merely plugged in the wrong way, because it's totally possible, you're frying somebody's equipment? That's just beyond my penis pump. What do you guys think about that? I mean, these are simple decisions, right? I mean, these are really simple, elementary concepts. The product that you sell shouldn't destroy, within reason, somebody's equipment, right? So maybe we should do something or employ some sort of fabrication that keys this thing so that it can't be installed in any fucking direction. Hadouken!
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. The easiest way is mechanically, like you said. Another option is
like the digital port is designed.
The other option is it takes quite a bit of electronics experience, though. You would do it backwards and see what happens if it's backwards, and employ. It's not always possible, but it is possible. Employ semiconductor protection on the circuit design, such that if you go backwards, then everything is protected and nothing gets damaged.
Cock block.
That's more like a luck on how things line up. And if you're really good at electronics, you could do that, but easier to just make it so it doesn't even go in backwards in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot of fuckery here, guys. I'm really disappointed in life. I just, the whole YouTube thing, though. Yes. We have to do something.
Yeah, I mean, all we can say, I guess, is to stay away from YouTubers who have
their milk and bread come from this. You know what I mean?
Millions of followers, but don't admit what they don't know. Like the perfect example of good YouTubers is Try and Corey at My Life in Gaming. They never profess to be experts on anything that they don't understand, and they always seek out advice from people before they make a judgment. They would never recommend a product that they couldn't, justifiably say is well designed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. It's a good model. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of these people should really follow in Mark and Corey's example. I mean, they're the definition of what you should do.
Yeah, you know how much work they put into doing all that research? Nobody's gonna want to do that much work. That's the problem.
Well, that's
a
why
lot of behind the scenes work. Tons.
That's why they have 2 episodes a month and not like 2 episodes, 3 episodes, 4 episodes a week that are 10 minutes long and just garner insane amounts of views.
Well, I know that Ste and I have spent hours and hours with them, like on Skype. For example, the UFO video. I mean, Mark put so much time into that thing because he wanted everything to be accurate. Most importantly, he wanted it to be correct. I mean, that is just it's really that's something I can really respect. Is people who really do that, and they are A+ in my book. Just good dudes for sure.
Yeah. So
that's why I go out of my way, like
Me too.
when they ask, the questions or ask us to review information for them. Sometimes spend like the whole day just working on that,
right,
to help them out.
Yep, I'm with you.
I mean, all we can do, I guess, is recommend that people. I mean, I'm not to say that you should not watch YouTubers who put out 5 videos a week, but if they are putting out 5 videos a week, perhaps they're not doing technical research. So be careful about product recommendations. Like, if you love that there are top 10 Sega Genesis games to FAP to, go for it. But don't go to them for product recommendations. But as we say, we don't really know amongst ourselves how to combat this. So if you guys have recommendations, we'd love to hear it in the comments. After we wrap up the video, you can post them below since the chat's kind of ephemeral and not permanent. But you can comment after this thing's over and maybe give us suggestions for how we can reach more people and convince them to avoid situations like this where we have GameCubes that are just blowing up and not working anymore.
Real talk.
Yeah.
Real talk.
Yeah, I don't think it's trying to reach out and expand our viewership as much as getting the message out. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, both of those are achieved by the same means, but I mean the goal is different. So.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make this very clear because we're talking about this. Somebody actually suggested to me, this has come up in conversation before, obviously, and somebody, not amongst us, but somebody else suggested, well, wouldn't it be a reasonable solution if you reached out, or when these YouTube people reach out to you and they want to review your product or have your product to give it to them? No, that's not the answer. And as a matter of fact, I make it a rule of mine. I don't give anything to any YouTuber. If they want it, they can pay for it. And the reason for that is because I believe that sets up a false precedent. Now, I have very good friends who are YouTubers, obviously, that I help, in a multitude of ways. But I don't. When somebody asks me for a sample or a copy of a design or a product that I have, they don't get it unless they pay for it. Because I'm not going to fall under that. I refuse to allow my stuff and the things that I put my stamp on to fall into that same failed process of, well, he's given this to us for free. We have to endorse the shit out of it. We have to say nothing but nice things about it. Fuck that. You want it, you buy it, motherfucker.
We are the same way. We've gotten requests from people that have 10 YouTube followers and a lot of YouTube followers, and it's always the same. We've only given away like a handful of cables to people that we know, and we always specify that, hey, we want your opinion on this. We're giving this to you for free because we want you to put it through its paces, give us feedback, and not because we want you to make a video on it. Actually, we prefer if you didn't make a video on it.
Don't make a video.
If you feel inclined to, go ahead, but we really don't want you to. And so, like, Mark and Corey are a perfect example of that. Like, we give them cables for free because we know that they will do the due diligence of putting it through its paces and compare it to a million other things and not just put out a puff piece.
And tell us about it. Give us feedback about it.
But, I mean, you know, when other people just reach out to us that we don't know and like, hey, can I get a cable so that I can review it on my channel? It's like, yeah, you can. Here's the link to the shop. If you love it that much, you can buy it.
I don't, and I've mentioned this before. I don't understand the mentality of wanting to go through a backdoor channel to get something. I always like. Maybe it's just me and I'm weird, different from everyone. That I always like going through the front door. I mean, we buy stuff.
He's sick.
Yeah, that'll be the quote for
yeah, that's right.
I always like going through the normal channels. I
mean, when I had said earlier that I was talking to Zeldaxpro, like in every email I sent to him, I was like, I'm going to pay you for this, just so you know. Like,
it's not even just payment, just setting up a route that's not the normal direct route.
Yeah,
I feel like is a hassle for everyone.
Yeah, it is.
It is a hassle because it's you know, a lot of us, well, maybe only some of us, but a lot of us have very defined sort of. Maybe they're not super efficient, but we do have a streamlined process for our processes. And when somebody asks for special considerations, it's just a wrench in the gears. And I really don't do that either. I never do that, as a matter of fact. Yeah, that's if you want it, you have to wait 2 to 3 days or 6 years. Stop bitching about it. You know who you are.
All right. Well, we can move on, I suppose.
Questions?
We've gotten our rant through. So yeah, let's we have questions that were posted last time, and now if you're in the chat would probably be a good time to start throwing things at us, and we can kind of scroll through. But we'll hit the stock questions we have from comments last time. I heard Steve talk about the DC bias curve from MLCCs. Do tantalum SMD caps suffer from the same effects?
No, I don't think so. And I think I read this comment. It's like you can't find anything on Google about it. Another name for it is the voltage coefficient. And actually, that op-amp applications thing and the linear design, both of the analog devices books, they have a chapter in here about passive components, and they have a really nice chart of the different type of capacitor versions that are constructed from different materials, and its advantages and disadvantages. And it seems like only the class 2 ceramics have that high voltage coefficient. Tantalums have their own pitfalls. They actually have some serious ones where going over its voltage rating or connecting them backwards, they have a really bad failure mode where they fail shorted and they catch fire and they spark. And so even if you're normally operating a 5 volts and you put a 6.3 in, you got to worry about even small transients that'll go over its rating for a short amount of time. So you got to be really careful when designing with tantalums, and that's why I think Voultar uses really high voltage rated tantalums in his stuff, because
I double it from the supply. So if it's a 5-volt supply, like any system that I designed for, it's at minimum 10 volts on the tant caps. It's just a good practice, in my opinion.
Yeah, because if voltage is ramping up on there and you got a transient with a spike that goes up to 7 or 8,
you're safe.
Even for that small amount, the reaction in the tantalums is quick. It's not like aluminum electrolytics where doing that won't damage it or anything like that. When aluminum electrolytics go bad, the top pops, the thing flies up to the ceiling, and it's open. It fails open, so it's a lot safer if you screw up.
Right. Exactly.
So I guess the short answer is no, but tantalums have their own problems. And check out those analog device books. I think they have the same exact chapter, just one is copied and pasted into the other book.
This question might be more for Voultar's alley, or maybe René's. Is there a way or a mod that allows you to play PS1 PAL games on an original NTSC PS1?
Oh, sure there is. There are multiple different ways. You can do a you can do a mod chip, or you can buy a pressed disc that will change the region, like a PSX boot exchange, for example. If you have a Game Shark dongle, depending on the firmware, you can often exploit those, or you can flash custom firmware to a lot of those Game Shark PS1 dongles, if your PS1 has an expansion port, that will allow you to change the region of the system. So yeah.
There's two parts in that question. There's the region compatibility of the console, and then there was the TV portion. So, you have to, if you get the thing to run, if you get the PAL game to run on the NTSC console, is a 576i coming out of that console, or 288p, 50 hertz?
Say that again? Yeah, I'm sorry, my headphones totally cut out.
So if you do succeed in getting past the region protection, what type of signal is coming out of the console? Is it a 50 hertz signal or a 60 hertz signal?
It depends on the device that you use. For example, if you use the PSX boot exchange, this is 15 years ago, so I'm going on memory. So you can either have it to where the region that you select in the menu is married to the output, or you can independently change the region to PAL, and you can still have it output NTSC 60 hertz, or you can change it to PAL 50 hertz with that resolution to go with it. So with a mod chip, though, like a Multimode 3 Mayumi V4, which I highly recommend, when you put in that PAL game, it'll read it as a PAL game, and it'll set the video mode to PAL.
Okay.
So
if your TV doesn't support 576i or 288p, you'll probably get a no signal or something. I know your Vizio did 576i when we were screwing around with it.
Right.
The problem with doing, ideally, I guess you would want to set the output to 60 hertz, because even if your TV supported 576i, it's still converting it, frame rate converting it, so it's going to look a little goofy.
Yep.
And choppy on the 60 hertz TV that you have.
Yep.
So,
right.
So it sounds like that exchange, the homebrew or the boot exchange, is the better solution, because you could set the output mode to 60 hertz.
I don't know. I'm trying to think if that was the original pressed disc version of boot exchange that allowed you to do that, or if somebody hacked it and kind of made a permutation that was based on boot exchange that gave you those additional options. But I know for a fact there are several options out there that will allow you to independently change the video output mode despite the region that the console is booting in, if that makes any sense. Because the way, a 1 minute explanation of how a PS1 security works, basically is there is an ASCII string in a certain part of the disc, I think in the wobble, that can't be read or written to with 99.9% of CD burners. And with PAL, I think it's SCAI for PAL. For America, it's whatever A, and for Japan, it's blah 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 J. So what happens is with these, like the mod chip, it will just span this ASCII code, this ASCII string, the whole time you turn the system on. So regardless if the data is there or not there, because on a burned game, that ASCII code's not going to be on the burn, right? So the mod chip is supplying that by injecting it and spamming it. So regardless of what's on the disk, it's going to spam the code and it's going to boot it up. So based on what that code is, the PlayStation will boot that video mode too. But there's some software out there that, regardless of what that ASCII string is for security, to tell us the PlayStation what to boot into, you can change the video register so it'll output PAL video modes.
to me, it sounds like there's a small pitfall if some software decides to change video modes within the game, because it sounds like this thing only sets it at boot up, and then if something else decides to write to a video register, it might change that.
I've never seen that happen with a PAL game or with an NTSC game rather. Not saying it's not possible, but whatever register it's writing to in the GM the whatever the video processor, I don't think that's a big problem, because also
you need subsequent writes to that register to know to change it to, so it has to be sniffing these commands, right, to change the video register. It'd be like, no, I don't want to change it to that. I want to change it to this.
You would assume so, that it would be monitoring that the address of whatever byte you write into that register that manipulates and controls the video output mode, that there would have to be some sort of background code running on the fly all the time, polling that just to ensure that, you know, the proper bytes in there for whatever video mode you're wanting to write. But I know that with like some of the boot discs that you could buy or even burn, if you did select the PAL video mode, it also gave you some hotkeys. So you could like hold L1 and then you could press like the directional pad to adjust the PAL screen mode. If you're on an NTSC system, it gives you control of the screen so you can properly center and stretch the PAL. It's really kind of interesting how the PS1 does that stuff. But yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I helped Joe, a Nutsack or GameSack, with that a couple months ago.
I can't speak to the PS1, but certainly there are Genesis and SNES games that, even though they never change resolution modes, they still reset that register at different points within the game, just for shits and giggles. I don't know. Just how the coders designed it. They call that loop that goes through and sets all the video registers.
So we're talking about the region here, and Ste, I want to come back to something you said earlier, where you recommended people get a PAL GameCube and use the SNES component cables from you guys. Do you have any kind of that weird, wonky video resolutions if you're using a PAL GameCube with your cables?
So the PAL GameCube, if you boot using either a freeloader disc or the SD Media Launcher disc, Action Replay disc, you could boot NTSC games on it, and all the NTSC games run in 60 hertz. But you can't do 480p out of the analog port, so everything will run in 480i. Or if you're running the Game Boy player, you can run it in 240p.
Okay.
All right, let's go on. Maybe we answer one question that I saw in the chat. God damn it. Have any of you tried one of those Raspberry Pi oscilloscopes? Are they worth it?
Turd. No, I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't.
But
I can't imagine.
I bet the sampling rate is like, I don't know.
Terrible, yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah, I can't see enough data bandwidth going onto those GPIO ports to do anything meaningful.
It depends what you want to do. Like, if you want to get your hands dirty and just, like, start learning stuff, they might be good to just mess around with for really cheap.
I feel like a second or third or fourth hand oscilloscope from the 80s or 90s
would be a better buy.
Better, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, somebody could even pick up my old TDS 220 and have a better scope than what you can get from a Raspberry Pi, probably.
Let us know when that's on Craigslist.ca.
Yeah, and when is another shipment coming from your area? Like planes that come every 3 months to get food and supplies over there.
Next time the dog sled goes out there, I'll
yeah,
let you
that's
know.
right. And so this was, I think, a question that I thought was worth addressing. He pointed to a timestamp in our previous video when Ste was talking about framemeister noise in the MegaMan X background, the purple kind of flickering that you were talking about. And he said, I think there's a misunderstanding. The screen on MegaMan X actually dims between the street lamps on the highway stage. It's a lighting effect, a feature in the game, and not an issue with anyone's equipment. Yada, yada, yada.
I feel like that's a misunderstanding because that was just an example of a solid color where the flickering occurs. It occurs in solid colors in any game. Yeah. Where it's like this flickering, and it's not if you're moving or anything. If you're stationary, you see like this really annoying flickering effect.
Yeah, this is specifically a framemeister noise issue.
Right. I don't think the SNES has any light diffusion hardware to do what he's. Maybe I misunderstood what he said was actually happening on the. Never mind. Forget it. Fuck it.
Yeah. So well, okay. So the answer to this question, to keep it short, is that there may be some case of them intentionally doing some things with the background, but that's not what we're referring to. There is noticeably added noise when you use the framemeister, actually regardless of input, to certain colors. It's more noticeable. And that purple background in the MegaMan 1 or MegaMan X first level is a place you can notice it.
That's just one example of. Yeah. That's when I first noticed it. I've been using our component cable straight in the TV forever. It was solid color, no noise, and then right when I got a framemeister, that's the first thing I noticed when I plugged it in.
And a lot of people too with the Super Nintendo, and I said this before, and I'll be very brief when I say it again. They confuse and conflate what is perceived as that shimmering ghosting effect that you see in solid colors. They see it with the framemeister, and they automatically assume that that's just a problem with all one chips. I will put this on the record and say it again. That issue that people refer to, I have seen maybe in 1% out of the 99.9% of cases where I've modified and thoroughly probed the one-chip SNES. So any of that shimmering bullshit that you're seeing in solid background or foreground colors on the SNES, I guarantee you it's the framemeister. I'll bet my penis on it. Remember, Steve, when you were over here and how awful that thing was? It just looked on everything. As far as it was fine. It was fine unless there was a consistently solid background. Then you just had like this wave of fucking turds. I really hate that thing.
Yeah, we unplugged it and just plugged this thing in directly as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean,
we tried to find every way around that.
Ah, God damn it. God damn it.
All right. So there's a question about going more in depth onto FPGAs versus emulation, but I think we should make that like a longer group topic for a future podcast. There's one that's like specific about how have any of you tried this RGB to component box? Probably not, but it probably sucks. It's probably answer for that. I mean,
no, it's actually I looked at that. That's this shinybow that everyone's talking about, and I don't know how much Bob wants me to talk about this, but eventually he wanted to kind of evaluate all the different component view options, and he sent me a couple things for my opinion, and I was kind of excited to. I didn't really mess around with it too much. I didn't have it time. I still don't really have time right now. But the first thing I did was took it apart. I was like excited to see what kind of cool stuff is inside, and I was kind of disappointed. It's the same thing as all the other
monoprice.
Box. No, not the mono. The CSY clone.
Okay, yeah.
The one that René has.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, except they got rid of the pops and put fixed value resistors, so the colors are probably all right. I'm just kind of disappointed. It's just another rehash. It's 14 op amps. You don't need 14 op amps to do this conversion. It's just like nobody knows how to do it like other ways, so they just like rehash the same design over and over again, and it was disappointing for me. I kind of wish it was more interesting, but people say it works well. I think Adam Zay uses that one a lot, and he only found one corner case where it didn't work well, but he thinks it works generally pretty well.
I think the major drawback of these things is that you have to kind of hack the audio out of it. I mean, I just installed like a bunch of RCA cables to get the audio out, but the pots, they're probably not like well tuned. From
you want to know why? I know why it's like that. The original version that was made like in Australia or whatever, they factory tuned the pots, and then when they made this clone version, they didn't. So it's just in its default pot position.
Oof.
So that's why they all look like crap.
What I meant was some of the pots is all of your good tuning zone is like within a few rotational degrees on one pot, and the rest is complete garbage, right?
So, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right too. Yeah.
So I think that's all the questions we had to answer from the previous podcast. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the chat. It's scrolling by pretty fast. So
well, there's one guy, Ray Comment says, "What's the best way to properly tune the pots on this thing?" And what I mean, it's pretty tough. Yeah, I use 240p, and you use those color patterns, and if you remove the blue, you're supposed to see one thing, and if you remove the red, you're supposed to see another, and so on. And I found that just by putting a screwdriver on the pots, that the color would change because the adjustments are so damn finicky. So, I mean, even if you're trying to go by a very scientific and proper method of adjusting the colors using, proper pattern generation or 240p, I thought it was very, very difficult to get consistent results. I have two of these devices, and completely different.
One thing I mentioned to Bob, and probably shouldn't because he wants me to do it, is because I calibrated the one I had, and you could take the pots out and measure them, and then put fixed resistors in, and then you have like a mod essentially to get it to work perfectly.
Right.
I'm very disappointed in myself that I never did that. Damn it.
I'm very disappointed in you too.
So there's a good question here. If Facebook is shit, true, and Reddit is shit, also true, and YouTube is shit, also true, where do you go to learn and check out community projects? And I think the answer that I would give
$1,000,000
is
question.
Retro RGB Weekly Roundup, where he distills through all the shit for you.
Yes.
It's too bad he's not here so I can suck the D live. But
you're not going to recommend any of the forums? Come on.
Yeah, I'm not going to recommend any of the forums.
Listen, I got to be honest, I used to be pretty, heavily involved in the forums. Well, Schmups is okay, but I've pretty much totally stopped and seized all forum activity because forums are really a losing fucking battle because you're fighting mythology from 20 years ago that people, it's kind of like fundamentalism. People just don't want to let it go.
I refer to it as the Schmoops forum. I thought that was the correct way to pronounce it, but.
So, the ISO zone, I was pretty big there as far as posting goes. Good place. Kind of went downhill a little bit, but I don't.
But Bob trolls on all these forums for you. That's what the whole point of the podcast is, that he spends his time going through those forums and gives you the stuff that you care about, and you can ignore the rest, right?
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, that's why I watch his weekly podcast, so I don't have to pay attention to that stuff.
Well, a lot of people argue and say he hasn't, but in my opinion, and I'm not saying this obviously just because he's a friend, but I think Bob is truly the sole impartial or non-biased voice when it comes to this technology, or just this sort of area of discipline, or this little niche group. I don't know anywhere else where you can find sort of an impartial view and just a straight up honest, rundown on the shit that's going down. I mean, point me to it, show it to me, but I don't see it.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. Like if you read some things on forums or Reddit, like on it specifically for our like HD retrovision cable, like should I use this with this, or should I use SCART cables if I'm using a framemeister? And the answers you get are so biased. If they came to us, they would get a more objective answer.
Right.
Like, we are way more honest and less biased than people on forums for our own products. There's so many situations where I would say, no, you shouldn't use our cables for this. You should use this instead. This is better for your setup.
Right.
Right.
It's
right.
It's hilarious how.
Yeah, we're shitting on forums a bit, but I have to say I used to contribute pretty heavily to the SMS Power forums, and I'll still say.
Is that your white power forum?
SMS Power.
Oh, sorry.
It's just baldness.
I mean, you're a bald white male. I just assumed.
Oh God.
Just like the video. Just like the video, you just assumed.
So it's all I heard was SS Power Forum, so I assumed it was some kind of Nazi thing. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, SMS Power. And I mean, out of all the forums that I've ever frequented and used, SMS Power is the only one that has been 100% civilized all of the time. There's never been any derailment of any kind on there, a la Shmups or Sprites Minds or whatever other stupid forums could be out there. I'm sorry, William. Yes, I did call it stupid. But yeah, I really recommend SMS Power. It's great for Z80 stuff and SMS, Game Gear, all those old Sega 8-bit consoles. I can't recommend that enough. I don't contribute there anymore, but it's still a really great forum.
Sure, I agree, totally agree. And NetSdev too.
Yeah,
I mean, I like NetSdev a great deal. There are certain, let's not even. I don't want to make enemies here.
Like without SMS Power, I would not have been able to do the FM Power base. I mean, all the information that I couldn't obtain on my own was readily available on SMS Power, and guys like Charles McDonald and whatnot are contributing there, and they'll happily help you out.
What are you doing? Now you got to pay out royalties. Way to go, you blew it.
No, I gave him TurboGrafx 16.
I'll send you a copy of this. Don't worry. So get up to speed on the legal stuff.
I had something he wanted, so that was good.
You know what I find? I don't know if it's disappointing. I mean, I'm going to kind of get on a soapbox here. I don't know if it's so much a feeling of disappointment or a feeling of longing, or if it's kind of an infuriating feeling, but it's just really unfortunate that you have people. There's nothing wrong with being a YouTuber, and there's certainly nothing wrong with having a large following, providing that you come by it honest, at least with your content, which, quite frankly, few of the people we talk about really don't in a lot of respects. But nonetheless, you've got somebody like Bob. I'm going to jerk on his cock a little bit. This is somebody who devotes his time, certainly his money, and all of his resources into something he really cares about, and that he's really trying to do nothing but full service for this community. And it's like, it's just unfortunate that somebody like Person X has 100,000 subscribers, and here Bob is with however many subscribers that he has, and he's the guy giving you the knowledges, but he's the guy that's least heard. And I just, I don't know. I just I wish there was something I could do for Bob that wasn't a sexual favor, but I'm getting tired of this shit. I'm really getting tired of it. I'm about to kick somebody's ass. I mean, that's not a threat. That's a promise. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, in that vein, we won't tell Bob how much better this podcast went without him. How much smoother it was, better flow. But in any case,
maybe it's not his absence. Maybe it's just the sucking of D.
Yeah.
Towards Bob that made it smoother.
Yeah.
Because we don't do that while he's here.
That's true.
Yeah, maybe we should.
All right. Maybe we should wrap up. And on that note, if you're new here, this is your first time watching one of our videos, please subscribe if you like this. Helps us get the word out and share it around to people who you think would be interested. Because we're, of course, wanting to reach a larger audience to spread the knowledges amongst the peoples.
Sure.
And with that, I think we can sign off. Yeah, anyone else have anything before we go?
Yeah, I mean, just get people to leave their comments and suggestions.
Yeah, as always, if you have questions, you can leave them in the comments below this video, not in the chat box here, and we will do our very best to answer them next week. And I know that one guy in particular, or next podcast, sorry, maybe in 2 weeks or some, I don't know. Whatever we figure it out, we'll announce it. But
Whenever we what?
Whenever we figure it out, we'll announce it.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll try to get to your questions. There was one question.
It's not the same without the beard.
Yeah. Oh, what are you gonna do?
And you got to have the annoying inflection in your voice too with the out.
Yeah.
Just say it. Just say it.
Figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah. So when Bob is, as Adam mentioned, as soon as Bob gets out of Alcoholics Anonymous, we will have him back next podcast, I hope. And
it's your turn to pick him up, Voultar.
Yeah.
Last time I did, he told me he wanted to marry me and Gandhi, so I'm not going through that again, you sick bastards.
Well, I only have one thing to say to Bob: is only quitters quit.
Yeah.
I'm sure he knows that.
I just, I hope Bob's getting the treatment that he needs, and more just as important as his alcoholism, his recovery from that, I really hope they do something with this chronic masturbation.
Yeah.
That has to
one
be
step at a time, dude.
Yeah. That's the next anonymous program we're gonna enter him in.
Sure. Yeah. Masturbators Anonymous.
And you think it was me that it was my fault I was banned from Canada? No. Had nothing to do with what I was doing with my body. I was just blamed for it.
He came to Canada, but they won't let him in again.
Oh, he came.
Yeah.
To Canada. That's the operative word there is came.
Just 6 more years and we can talk about this. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we'll also try to get to that the question next time. I've already put it kind of at the top of our priority queue to discuss the difference between FPGA hardware emulation and software emulation. I think that's an interesting topic that we could
that's going to be a great topic.
Explore a little bit instead of just spending a half an hour shitting on YouTubers. Hopefully none of them do anything in the next 2 weeks that causes us to to need to do that, but hope. We'll see.
You're hoping against hope.
Yeah, don't hold your breath.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.